This passage makes it clear that freedom is given to us so that we can choose. That's what it's for. Kind of like a hammer is meant to pound a nail or scissors are meant to cut things. They're worthless tools if we don't use them. And freedom is also no good if we don't use it to make choices. Freedom is not an end in itself. It is meant to be used for something, like the building of a life. And stability helps us to use our freedom to make choices that border our lives. And like this passage says, that marshal our energies and our resources so that we can build lives of meaning and integrity, so that we can be a tree. Stability is the practice that helps us to stay long enough in relationships or places to see the cracks, knowing that this is the time when transformation happens, knowing that the cracks are how the light gets in. When the cracks start to show, this is when we need grace. And stability is the practice that embodies gracious faithfulness, the promise that we will not run from others when they need us to show grace, the promise that we will practice patience and forgiveness and compassion and kindness in order to sustain relationships. Stability is also the promise that we will not run from ourselves and abandon the place and people that expose us, that reveal our own need for grace and transformation. The Benedictines are a monastic order that are marked by 3 vows. They border their lives with a vow to obedience, a vow to fidelity, and a vow to stability. Their vow of stability is the promise to live in a particular place their whole life with the same people, the same brothers in that place their whole life. Hospitality helps sustain this stability. But one Benedictine monk remarked that hospitality is often far easier to show with outsiders than with the brothers in their own monastery. Sometimes, he said, someone knocks and you open the door and see one of your own brothers again and say, "Oh, Christ, it's you again." I know this feeling. I cannot tell you how many times I do the dishes of the 3 young adults in my household. It sometimes feels like the main task in raising them is cleaning up after them. And sometimes this tempts me to treat them with impatience or even disdain. It feels like my life would be easier if they gave me more space. But what if in treating them with disdain, I am also treating Christ with disdain? What if in the longing to avoid the hardships of close proximity with my kids, I am also avoiding myself and also missing God?
Well, I've got 3 invitations for you to consider. 3 ways to help you remain stable as you keep moving forward in your journey with God. The first invitation is to declutter your commitments. Many of us have found that COVID has actually imposed this upon us. And while I truly grieve many of the things that I used to enjoy, especially playing sports, I have actually found it life-giving to have more breathing room in my calendar. It's allowed me to enjoy way more time with the most important people in my life, my family. You see, that's what decluttering our commitments is truly about. It's not about saying no to things because they're bad. It's about saying yes to the things that are important to us. So if you wish you were the kind of person who read more books or spent more time in prayer or spent more time outdoors or maybe spent more time with your children, maybe you need to consider the things in your life that are taking up your time and cut some of those things out. The second invitation is to embrace a new pattern that directs energy and focus towards the life you want to be living. Can I suggest that once again, COVID might actually be offering an opportunity? Okay, so show of hands. For real, let us know in the chat, how many of you have started walking or running way more in the past 9 months than you ever have before in your life. Hasn't that been so refreshing? I remember back in early COVID, our family had a routine of going for a walk together every night after supper. It was so lovely. It was time spent breathing in fresh air. It was quiet and peaceful. We were being active. It was time together with the people we love most. It was time to hold my wife's hand. It was time to listen to whatever random thoughts came to my kiddos' minds. One little pattern has the possibility to bring a sense of stability to an entire household. So I invite you to imagine the kind of life you want to live into and consider one way you can place a pattern in your life towards that end. See, I used to struggle finding quiet time alone with God to start my day. I tried doing it early in the morning before the kids were awake, but it turns out that Penny likes to wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm not setting my alarm in the 5s. So I used to try pulling out my Bible while I ate my breakfast, but you can probably imagine that our kitchen isn't the most serene area of the home in the morning. So a few months ago, I started simply bringing my breakfast into the living room. And sometimes I'll put in some earbuds and play some chill background music, and it allows me to enter into a really peaceful space where I can settle in, I can read my Bible, and I can spend some solid time in prayer. Is there a new pattern that you can embrace to help bring some stability to your life? Final invitation is to develop a rule of life. Now, I could spend an entire sermon talking about a rule of life, but essentially, it's an ancient tradition based on embracing a set of spiritual practices that guide us more deeply into the Christian life. One author describes a rule of life as an intentional, conscious plan to keep God at the center of everything we do. And if you like, you can spend your own time reading more about this, but can I suggest a simple place to start? And that is with our Lakeview Church postures. Are you familiar with those? You see, our postures, they essentially paint a picture of the way we want to position ourselves as Christians to join God in the renewal of all things. You can find them on our website, but if you need a little refresher, the postures are backward, locating ourselves in God's story, forward, anticipating God's movements, inward, creating sacred space to encounter God, and outward, collaborating with God locally and globally. So maybe this week, you could sit with those postures, pray over them, and get a sense for the kind of life they are inviting you to embody. And perhaps you could start to map out the ways that you are personally going to embody them moving forward. And maybe that will involve continuing in some of the patterns and practices that you're already living into. And maybe that will involve adopting some new patterns and practices that will help you reorient your life more fully around Jesus.